You're someone who has given a lot of effort to following the rules at different points in your life. You wanted to get along with people. They told you were difficult. We have the victim and the beggar coming up here. These are archetype cards. Victim prevents you from letting yourself be victimized or victimizing others. The shadow attribute, playing the victim for positive feedback in the form of pity, inability to maintain personal boundaries. But we got the light attribute card in this direction, so we're looking at the things that prevent us from allowing ourselves to be victimized, as well as the beggar card. Confronts empowerment at the level of physical survival, awakens the spiritual authority of humility, compassion, and self-esteem. The shadow attribute, dependence on others to the exclusion of effort. And this is the shadow we're supposed to be looking at here. 1 minute. Okay, so victim, when properly recognized, this archetype alerts you when you're in danger of letting yourself be victimized, whether that's through someone's passivity or their rash, inappropriate actions. It also helps you to see your own tendency to victimize others for personal gain. Everyone has this archetype. The goal is to learn how to recognize it in people and in yourself. And then for the beggar, it's not really to do with food, it says. Sometimes you may beg for attention, love, authority, and material objects. Represents a symbolic test that compels you to confront self-empowerment. The shadow beggar manifests as chronic dependence, lack of belief in your own abilities. Look for patterns and the way that you feel about generosity, compassion, and self-esteem. So it could be like thinking, I can only share when I have so much, or putting limits on our ability to be compassionate, even though there are genuine limits in the sense that compassion is something that's practiced and it's supposed to be modeled. We're going to look really quick at the myth of normal. So he's talking about, let's just listen. So, contained in the experience of shame, writes the psychologist Gershon Kaufman, is a piercing awareness of ourselves as fundamentally deficient in some vital way as a human being. People bearing trauma scars almost uniformly develop a shame-based view of themselves at the core, a negative self-perception most of them are all too conscious of. Among the most poisonous consequences of shame is the loss of compassion for oneself. The more severe the trauma, the more total that loss. The negative view of self may not always penetrate conscious awareness and may even masquerade as its opposite, high self-regard. Some people encase themselves in an armored coat of grandiosity and denial of any shortcomings so as not to feel that enervating shame. That self-puffery is as sure a manifestation of self-loathing as is abject self-depreciation, albeit a much more normalized one. So whether you think you're all that all the time or you think you're nothing, they are both a shame-based response. It's a marker of our culture's insanity that certain individuals who flee from shame into a shameless narcissism may even achieve great social, economic, and political status and success. Our culture grinds many of the most traumatized into the mud, but might also, depending on class background, economic resources, race, and other variables, raise a few to the highest positions of power. And before those paragraphs, both of which are on page 30 and 31, they're talking about this guy who says, I resist the opportunity to blame my mother. I'm a piece of shit because of me. And basically he's saying it's not just the parents' fault, but it is, a consequence. He goes into this a lot more in like all these other pages, but just talks about basically how we need to feel compassion and be nurtured in order to be able to do that with ourselves and other people. And some of us have been traumatizing our children longer than others as far as ancestry goes. I was the first person in my generation, my family, to try to stop sleep training I only have one, but it was a nightmare. You know, there are great Facebook groups, but I don't know if it was actually better for both of us in the end having her sleep next to me, which I know there is, you know, safe sleep practices and stuff like that, but training somebody to ignore their need for connection when we grow up to be, you know, humans that want that companionship. Some of us enjoy sleeping next to others. But yeah, taking that nurturing at nighttime away from our children has very drastic consequences. Colonization. But there are real, you know, trauma. Some of us are not so equipped to be around children all the time at nighttime or have people touching us all the time, and that's very valid. We need to be doing this together. Anyway, I don't even want this deck. Okay, that's compassion. 1 second. Now, I might have lost all of you already because you know, I mean, it's pretty far out there. A lot of people still do sleep train, and I'm not judging or saying, you know what I mean? Like, actually, I don't know if I had sleep trained my daughter, if she would have less trauma today or where we would be. But I do know that that's something that babies need. And in an ideal world, we wouldn't ignore. And we would have education systems that, you know, uplift people's voices. But that is not reality today. We're not really trained, so to speak, to look out for, you know, where people are being victimized and how people are being mined and how energy is being harvested. And that's what I want to know here is, 1 second. That's where a lot of us have had to make those trades. Dependence on others to the exclusion of effort. There comes a point, and I did this just the other day. I seen someone being kind of rough with their kid in front of me, and I just froze, and we walked away, and I did sort of try to connect with her afterwards, but the truth is there's tons of people doing power plays around all of us all the time, whether that's in our families, in our communities, we see it at work, and a lot of us we make choices to not say anything in order to keep a roof over our head, to keep out of psychiatric institutions, to keep out of prisons, because, and I'm not talking about like criminal activity here. I am talking about criminal activity, but maybe not in the sense that you would imagine, because I believe, you know, people that don't have a lot of money, sometimes they have to do what they have to do to survive, but it's a whole other thing if you have enough money to pay off the fines. And then you get to fly off to the moon with everything on fire, simultaneously burning and boiling and flooding and bubbling and congestioning behind you with diseases from things that have melted from the Arctic. Fucking... Anyways, I'm mostly just channeling here, but I do want to see if there's anything in the tarot right now. The Empress card just popped out. So that is all about being intuitive, and that is something that is nurtured. Spirit, do you have anything you want to say to the Star card? That's a whole other thing too. Like, we're taught like not to rock the boat, not to draw attention to ourselves. Well, my thing is, okay, you want us all to sit still, but what if we were all just wiggling and dancing together? Then no one would be being attention seeking. If we're all doing it together. Rising up. What's meant to happen is that we're meant to be introduced to our magic at a young age. But instead, we're lost. We get ignored when we speak up, when we threaten our parents and our family's survival and social status.